Welcome to Cybersecurity Sense, a weekly podcast providing updates and insight into the latest in cybersecurity. Brought to you by LBMC Information Security. Now, here's your host.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to LBMC Cybersecurity Sense with another PCI Monthly update, this time for the month of August. And today we're going to be hitting requirement 5. And as always, we are here with Andy Kerr and Kyle Hinterberg, our two favorite here PCI specialists at LBMC. Guys, how are y'all doing?
Doing pretty good.
Now, wait a minute. You said favorite.
Yeah.
What do you mean? You got somebody else that you two other PCI specialists that you talk
to? You guys are the only two, so you guys are automatically my favorite here. So, man, Kyle, I guess we can go ahead and open up with some news here. We'll just cut straight to the chase as we usually do. So, Kyle, what's going on in the PCI universe?
Sure. The biggest news is just a couple weeks away now. It's the PCI North America community meeting. So if you haven't got your tickets yet, you better get them fast. I don't know. You got a couple weeks. September 12th is when it starts, and so that's somewhere that LBMC will be out there. And if you're not able to make it, tune in next month. We'll definitely have some takeaways. If anything interesting happens out there, we'll try to report as best we can. But I'd still recommend to be there in person if you can.
Absolutely. Where is that? Where is it this year?
No, Portland this year. So maybe not the number one place I would recommend to have a conference, but still hoping it's going to go well. I'm excited for it.
Portland, Oregon will be interesting. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, and for everybody's information, next year it will be Boston. So there may be a few more folks that decide to make that journey instead of all the way over to Portland, Oregon. So we'll see how that goes.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm. Another interesting piece of news is, if you remember, I think Andy and I last year after the community meeting, we had kind of an update that we put out on some of the new items. And one of them was that the council was going to release a job board. And just this month now they finally did. So you can now go to the PCI's council and check out their job board. I don't know, Andy, if you had a chance to look at that a little bit.
I have. Yep. Went out there and looked at it the other day. Looks
cool.
I like the layout. Yeah, I like the layout. And what this really is, the purpose is for those folks that need to be PCI compliant, it's a great resource for them to be able to go out there and go, hey, listen, I don't know even where to begin. Let me see if I can find somebody, who are the firms, who are the folks out there that I need to contact. So it's a great resource for those people that are actually looking to be PCI compliant and trying to find a QSA or a firm.
So is it meant for organizations to go in there and look for people and good references to use for PCI compliance, or is it meant for folks that are wanting to get into the industry and start working it?
That's a great question. Well, so actually it's both. There's a little bit of both there.
Perfect.
So it's not only for organizations looking for a QSA, but it's also for QSAs maybe looking for a change to another firm in some cases. So there's quite a few different resources out there for depending on what you're looking for. I mean, so I encourage everybody to go out there and at least check it out. Like Kyle just said, it just came out this month. So it's last month. I beg your pardon. It is now September 1st. So yeah, it's a great resource for everybody to go out there and have a look at.
That's awesome. So yes, is that all the news?
Yeah.
Cool. Well,
I think that's about it. I think there, not a lot of news. Everyone waiting for the community meeting. Probably be quite a bit more news after that.
I was about to say, it sounds like a lot unravels at the community meetings. It sounds like just afterwards, kind of trying to digest everything that's said or covered. I'm sure it's just like drinking from a fire hose. It's hard to process everything at one time. But,
yeah, I think a lot of folks are going to be, and Kyle, I know we're going to start moving into this here in just a second, but at least to kind of preface this, within the past several months, as folks are starting to prepare for PCI 4.0, there's starting to become a lot of anxiety, behind it. And I'm hoping that the community meeting will put some of that at ease for a lot of folks. But however, there's still a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of changes, a lot of things that need to be implemented, but a lot of these changes, like 90-something% of these changes, are not going to go into effect until 2025. with the caveat that once 3.2.1 is retired and 4.0 goes into full effect, at that time needs to be when all the different merchants and service providers out there need to start doing these things. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be checking them until 2025, but you need to start doing them.
It's going to be the 1.5, 2 year, 3 year long process of getting ready for 25 for 4.0. It's get ready for 4.0 for the next 1.5 years or so. Oh man. But yeah, no, that date will creep up on you quick too if you're not on top of your stuff. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
then once
100%.
I was about to say, once you guys start coming through and checking things as well, I hate to say it, but I know there are going to be folks out there that didn't do their due diligence of their time, and they're going to get caught up in that whole mess. So, like Andy's saying, go ahead and get on top of that. But today, steering the conversation more about PCI, we're going to be talking about Requirement 5. So I'll let you guys kick off Requirement 5 here.
Yeah, for anyone who isn't used to it, Requirement 5 is basically, it's always been the antivirus requirement. Now with 4.0, they've returned it anti-malware, but essentially it's still, really 95% the same. It's, really looking for the same types of things, just wanting you to run anti-malware everywhere and anywhere you can run anti-malware. That's the long and the short of Requirement 5.
A Windows Defender, throw it everywhere.
Well, and you would hope by this point, that everybody, if they're having to be PCI compliant, that these are already in place. Now, one of the other minor changes, much like what we've talked about in the other requirements, and this is going to be specifically to 5.1.2, and you can kind of see it through the other requirements, 4.1.2 and 3.1.2, and all these, is the defining of the roles and responsibilities. Like we've said in the past, PCI is being very specific about who ultimately does the buck stop with, who is over the roles and who is over the endpoint protection here. So this needs to be defined. And again, not a specific person like we've talked about in some of the other podcasts, but that role. Who is that role, that go-to person that will be in those policies? So those needs to be defined by that particular agency.
Now, yeah, and it's absolutely happened to me before where I go in to do an interview and talk about anti-malware, and you get on the call and, the people on the call are like, oh, that's not us anymore. We shifted that over to the end user team, or we moved that over to this engineer team or whatever. And that's where it's so important to have these documented, because you need to know who is responsible for performing these responsibilities, who's actually the ones deploying this on the systems, who's reacting to alerts from anti-malware, because again, if you're not doing anything with the alerts, then it's useless anyway. So, you really have to know who's doing what.
Now, are there any kind of software specifications of what as far as like anti-malware, that's a very broad term, right? Are there any specific solutions that they would like to see, or is it just in general you just need anti-malware?
Generally, you just need anti-malware, more or less something that's, decent. Obviously, if you attempt to make your own or something like that, that's not going to necessarily cut it. But, for the most part, if you have anything that's decent, you're going to be good. There are requirements where it has to be able to detect all known types of, viruses and whatnot. It has to be able to remove or block, viruses. So, at the end of the day, as long as you have a reputable known product and you haven't completely kneecapped it by putting in a million exceptions, you should be fine on that side of it. One of the changes, though, that I think a lot of people are going to like with 4.0 is that historically, the requirement has always said that you needed to do scheduled scans. And back in the 90s, that was what anti-malware always did. You did scheduled scans. But more recently, almost every tool, modern EDR tools, all of them are more so doing, continual analysis where they're looking at things all the time. They're scanning on access, and they're not really relying on scheduled scans. And now you have the option to do either or. You can still do scheduled scans, or you can rely more on that continuous behavioral analysis where it's looking at stuff, more in real time.
That's nice to have that flexibility there.
Mm-hmm. I think it's huge because it's one of the places where, otherwise to me, it's always frustrating to tell a client, well, you're not actually doing scheduled scans. So either you have to, just do a scheduled scan once a week so we can kind of check that box, or, you might have to document a compensating control or write this up a little bit differently. Now it's like, yeah, you have this tool, it's doing better than scheduled scans, and we don't have to, act like that's weird.
Right.
Yeah, and another one of the big changes that's kind of come out, and there's a little bit of a shifting around of the numbers too. So in 3.2.1, there is a requirement where basically it says if there's any systems that are considered to be not commonly affected by malware, that some sort of periodic evaluation, kind of to identify and evaluate, the malware threats that kind of affect those systems. So a lot of folks that I got some input from always felt this was kind of vague. Well, what are we really talking about here? It doesn't really define what that is. Well, what is periodic? What are these systems? So PCI has kind of gone ahead and made that change, and kind of to help folks to say, all right, let's define this a little bit better. And this is actually shift down to 5.2.3. And this basically saying it changed the verbiage a little bit. It says that those system components that are not at risk for malware are evaluated periodically. Now, again, it still doesn't say, if firewalls or, network devices, or are we talking about Linux devices, or are we talking about Apple? I mean, what really is those? What are those system components? Well, this is where PCI is kind of leaving this up to the merchant or the service provider. So basically what they're saying that has to be done, that there needs to be a documented list of these components that are not at risk for malware. And you guys have to be able to perform, identify and evaluate it, and be able to do some sort of targeted risk analysis on what that periodic evaluation is going to look like. So I think in a lot of instances, and most folks feel like this is Linux. These are Linux systems, or in some cases they'll say, "Oh no, malware isn't really made for Macs." But we all know that's not true. It is out there. I have run across it. I'm sure Kyle has as well. So there definitely needs to be some sort of periodic evaluation and analysis of those systems, and it has to be documented as to why you do not feel that these are at risk, where the targeted risk analysis comes into play. So I know nobody's really doing these right now. There is definitely a template out there that PCI has provided for the targeted risk analysis, and this will have to be something that is evaluated annually. And again, another reason why the roles and responsibilities are going to be defined, because it's going to be, hey, this is such and such group's responsibility to look at these not at risk for malware devices, and you tell us why these do not need the malware installed, and you need to define what these periodic evaluations are.
Yeah, and I would say that's the critical point is really, if you have systems that you don't want to put anti-malware on, you really need to have a strong reason nowadays, because I feel like, if you go back 4 or 5 years, a lot of organizations, Andy, to your point, didn't run it on Linux systems, didn't always run it on Mac systems. But now almost, I have a client that's running Microsoft Defender on their Linux systems, because that's an option now, which seems completely crazy, but that's an option. So now it's much harder to try to pretend you don't need to put anti-malware tools on anything other than, basically appliances that can't handle it.
So how does this apply to like removable media, like anything you would plug into a device, or anything of that sort?
That's another change with 4.0, is that historically PCI hasn't really cared about like USB sticks, even though obviously, Will, you would know this from working in the pen test world, that USB sticks are one of the easy ways to get into an environment.
Deliver the payload.
Exactly. And now there's going to be a requirement that if you allow your employees to use USB sticks or removable media like that, your anti-malware system has to have the capability to scan them, or do, again, that more continuous analysis of them, something to protect systems. And if you don't want to worry about that, my recommendation would be just to, remove their capability to use USB sticks entirely, unless people really have a need to use them.
Right. So Kyle or Andy, how can this be? So we've talked about system security. We've talked about removable media and how that stuff needs to be scanned. What about some of the soft targets like us, like our email inboxes and whatnot? Like, let's say I get a phishing attack. How is there any guidance that covers that specific portion of the PCI requirement?
Yeah, and that's another place where, to me, I feel like it's a kind of a fairly radical shift for PCI, because there's now a requirement in requirement 5, and I don't know about you, Andy, I almost feel a little bit like they just kind of shoehorned that one in there because it doesn't necessarily fall into anti-malware, but there's now a requirement that you have to have some type of phishing protections. Like the easy things to think about would be something like a proof point or a Mimecast or something that you're using to protect your users from phishing. But the reason that it really is a departure to some degree from the way PCI has historically handled things is that it's a requirement that has to be applied to a system that isn't actually in scope. And the requirement even stipulates that just because you need to do these anti-phishing things, your email and your email solution doesn't magically become in scope. You just have to do this as well.
Interesting. That's interesting how they threw it. It makes sense though.
I've gotten several questions about this already when I brought this up. You know, people are like, well, wait a minute, you know, does that mean my email server's in scope now? Not necessarily, as long as it's not sitting in your CDE somewhere. You know, you're not going to have an issue with this. But you know, I found that I've had some conversations with the additional QSAs about this, and the kind of understanding of why the PCI has kind of shifted gears. So there's a couple other sections. Training has gotten very specific about, hey, there needs to be, you know, training specific to phishing attacks. This and the endpoint protection. Again, I believe I'm with you, Kyle. I feels like it kind of got shoehorned in, but PCI felt like, you know, they hadn't really addressed one of the largest attack surfaces that were out there. I mean, everybody knows the little tests that kind of come out in every corporation that, you know, are these fake emails, you're trying to mark stuff, and you always get somebody, you know, there's always somebody going to click on it. And I think, and I'm not trying to, you know, exaggerate these statistics, but from what I recall, I sat in on a conference one point, and they almost historically, you're going to get somewhere between 10 and 20% of your population, even if you've gone through it, you know, 1,000 different times, you've done the education, you still get somewhere between 10 and 20% of the population of your company almost every single time they do something like this. So I think PCI really had to come out and address these problems and make it a part of DSS and say, hey, yeah, you know, we're trying to put some controls in here that deal specifically with phishing attacks to try to help, you know, offer another layer of security. And we're actually calling it out. We're not being generic. We're saying phishing attacks, you have to address it. This is how you do it.
Yeah. And I think a big part of it too is, you know, no matter how segmented you want to, you know, separate your kind of your corporate Active Directory environment and email and all of that, where just your day-to-day users are, from your cardholder data environment, no matter how many segmentation controls you put in place, no matter what you all do, if someone clicks on one of those emails and gets, you know, some attack, it's just really a matter of time until they find their way over. And that's, you know, part of this. And again, I'm sure that Will and the pen testing world can speak to that and the efficacy of phishing a user, and that once you've done that, you know, that's all she wrote.
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, that click that you, or that link that you click in the email could contain literally anything. It could be malware, which is why you have the anti-malware, but still you don't want to click on the link in the first place.
Well, and you know as well as I do. I mean, I used to be a pen tester myself years
Andy's
ago.
got some experience over here. He's just being quiet.
Well, and you know how it's challenging to get by anti-malware these days. It's not easy. I mean, trying to create a payload from scratch that's not going to be detected, it's not as easy as it used to be. You used to be able to slap something on the front, a prefix and a suffix on there, and, you know, scramble a few things around in the middle, and the payload would be able to get by. That's a lot harder these days. You really have to get inventive when it comes to payloads and being able to deliver them
Right.
to get anything, a shell on anything these days. But
it's wild because it's not even so much so just the payload, it's behavioral analysis of the program.
Yeah,
Which is why anti-malware
exactly.
is such a key thing that you need. Because it doesn't just see, oh, this is a bad program. It watches and sees exactly what it's doing. It doesn't just watch and see what it is. It sees what it does. So you really have to do things a weird way in order to get something to work.
Yeah, exactly.
But okay, so here's our monthly question here for the 2 QSAs. So are organizations required to rotate QSAs?
Simple answer there is no. There's never been a requirement to do that. Some organizations think that they need to, or that they, some organizations kind of require it. But yeah, there isn't a requirement to do so. And I don't know about you, Andy, but generally my recommendation, and this isn't even just speaking, on behalf of LBMC, but just my opinion, is that a lot of times when you rotate QSAs, it can cause some difficulties, because once someone understands an environment, they know where to check and where to look, and you pull in a completely new QSA. It can be awesome, but at the same time, they can be, a little bit lost for the first year or two until they actually figure out the environment they're looking at. So, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are there, Andy, but that's kind of my take on it.
I'm kind of torn, to be perfectly honest, on this, because it's one of those situations to where if you pull in a brand new QSA and that QSA is a digger and they start digging and they might find something that a previous QSA might not have found, which is great for everybody across the board. They're calling something out and they're saying, hey, listen, I saw this. Oh, you know what? Our previous QSA never saw that before, or this or that. But at the same time, if you're a brand new QSA, it's like drinking from the fire hose here. You're trying to take in all this brand new environment, and at the same time, you're trying to call things out. It can be challenging sometimes to find those little, things that other QSAs might not have found. I go back and forth. You can dig, and changing, I don't know. I think what I would suggest is that as a merchant or a service provider, is the rotating of a QSA maybe every couple of years. I've seen a lot of merchants do this, a lot of service providers do this, is that they'll keep a QSA for 2 years. Sometimes I've seen 3, and then they'll rotate for 2 years. That way you are getting the same QSA for 2 years. They're digging, and then you're switching over to somebody else, and maybe they give them another opportunity to call some things out that wasn't previously there. So I see the benefit in both. It's tough. It's tough to call that out and say which one is the best.
Another option that I really like as well that kind of fits into there is where, you kind of rotate your lead QSA, and then when you rotate to a new lead QSA, you stay at the same QSA company, and that lead QSA kind of then backs up the new lead. So, for instance, if you've been working with Andy for 2 or 3 years, then, you say, hey, we want some fresh eyes, I'll come in and look at it, but I'll still have Andy working with me. And that way I have his insights, but my fresh eyes.
That's smart.
Yeah,
that's
true.
Smart. That would definitely help that kind of lay over time there. Trying to catch up and understand what's going on in an environment for sure. So the meat of the question, it is not required. It is completely preference. However, y'all's guidance, considering you do this for a living, just keep those things in mind before you decide to start switching up QSAs.
Yep. Yeah. I hate to give the age-old question of all QSAs. It depends.
That's isn't that the most redundant question there? Oh man. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for our August podcast, everybody. Kyle, Andy, you guys have any parting thoughts before we hit the road?
Looking forward to seeing you out in Portland. You better be there.
Portland's going to come quick. It's going to come quick.
And I would say for those out there that are still struggling with 4.0, find a QSA firm. LBMC, we have a great gap analysis solution to kind of help you with this, at least get you going in the right direction. So there's no need to be pulling your hair out and losing your mind over 4.0. Obviously, you need to make some decisions and choices quickly, but we would be more than glad to at least walk through a gap analysis. Hey, these are the new requirements that you're going to be responsible for. Let's see where you are and where you need to be. So,
Perfect. I can just picture Andy back there doing a wink, wink, hint, hint. Hey, come talk to us. To figure out your questions. I like it. I like it. Perfect. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to LBMC Cybersecurity Sense. This is the August update, and we will see you again for the next month to cover Requirement 6. Take care and have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.